Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I thought I would chat with you guys a little bit about, what the emerging science is saying. I just got done sitting down reading through a bunch of meta-analysis on this of what the researchers are finding when they're really scanning human bodies, and they are comparing different metrics, to where they're literally taking competitive bodybuilders and then say competitive weightlifters and doing DEXA scans. They're also doing stuff where they're able to scan certain things with proteins inside the body separately. And the evidence is just showing more and more and more that almost all strength, I mean, it's debated as to what percentage, but it's definitely above 90% at this point. 90% or more really does seem to be entirely a matter of muscle protein, right? Accruing more muscle protein. And I think the reasons we see a little bit of disparity here, right? The reasons we're seeing some of the disparity is because, again, the bodybuilding world, you're seeing some of the sarcoplasmic growth. And that seems to be the biggest difference. The absolute biggest difference does seem to be the fact that the appearance of lean muscle tissue and actual contractile protein growth can be complicated a bit by certain things people use, certain training styles, to where both storage factors like storing extra glycogen in the muscles doesn't directly contribute to strength, the ability to produce force. Okay. We also notice that sarcoplasmic growth doesn't matter. Now, muscle fiber composition isn't as important as people think, okay, and it's really not, and that's because the longer we train, the more and more that our faster twitch fibers are the ones that grow. In other words, a lot of your more intermediate endurance fibers, they don't grow that much the longer we train, okay? They seem to have a larger size cap, but they contribute to your strength. In other words, even the muscle fibers that you use to walk in your legs still contribute. They contribute to your maxes. They contribute to your 5-rep sets. They're just not as fatigued as easily, but they still contribute to the force production. But yeah, what's being noted is that seems to be the real factor. Now, some people will say, well, how come some people are just stronger pound for pound? And that's a good question. And I think a lot of that has to do with levers, and that's also what's being found: the length of your arms and legs, your moment arms, obviously the distance you move a weight. Okay. Leverage is distance moved and all that stuff. That might matter for how much you're doing on a specific lift. But what is the strength component? The strength component is what the muscle is producing, right? Now, how long of a lever it has to work all that through can vary a little bit. How far you're moving 500 pounds matters. In other words, it does take more strength to move 500 pounds 30 inches instead of 15 inches, right? I think we all understand this. It's actually a little harder, a little more work being done. Not saying it's double, though, because you got to get that weight moving. But when you start accounting for these things, it really is the muscle fiber size that determines force output. Okay, and it's the same thing with some of those lifters pound per pound. Well, a lot of them are very lean, a lot of them don't have maybe a lot of sarcoplasmic growth. The other thing, they may be largely faster twitch dominant growth. In other words, those muscle fibers grow faster. But really, when you start looking at some of these people, a lot of them are carrying just very dense, hard muscle, and they're fairly lean. Some of these really, really, truly strong pound per pound people. And they have good leverages. Their muscle insertions allow for a little better leverages, so on. But what we're looking at is the ability to produce force. And when you start locking muscles into machines so you can measure the force, let's say the bicep, the tricep, the quad, that's what we're looking at, because there's a coordination component to moving a big exercise. Okay, there is that. There is always that coordination in. And we have to be clear, that's part of the neural drive, that's part of the other stuff. But if we talk about the strength of an individual muscle, the ability of each individual muscle to add to the equation is purely muscle hypertrophy. It is purely, and this is what the research is showing. It is how much contractile protein growth you have in there. In other words, the amount of force that your bicep, your tricep, your quad, your pec, whatever, the strength that that muscle produces when it is just tested by itself seems to be almost entirely, and there are some experts who are saying, looking at the data, it's 100%, like not even almost, it is entirely how thick the muscle fibers are, the contractile protein elements. So this creates a bit of a conundrum there, doesn't it? And what it means is that you can't truly separate size and strength, at least at that level, what we call muscle fiber growth. That's all of your strength, because you can't change the other things. Now, can you get a little more coordination to be better at a certain movement? If it involves multiple joints, multiple muscles, yes. Obviously you can get a little better coordinated at a deadlift, a squat, a bench press, right? Because it's more than one muscle involved. But the contribution of each muscle to its ability to do it, it's entirely for your levers based upon the size. And that's what the best science is starting to show when they measure it, like with what we have available. Okay. Now, there's growth, though, that's not that. So that's kind of the point that's made with the really, really high rep stuff a lot of the bodybuilders and stuff are doing. Does seem to be, and this is what's also being found, as we get better tools to measure it, this old hypothesis that seemed to be debunked for a while, as we get the ability to measure it, and it was never truly debunked, by the way, it was very heavily questioned, that there does seem to be a difference in ratios of sarcoplasms, again, all the cellular matrix of a muscle cell versus the actual parts of it that contract. Those ratios seem to be able to change, in other words, a casing around it. But what's also been noted by certain researchers and experts is that the people who have a higher ratio of myofibrillar, that's the contractile parts, they also seem to be harder. When they diet down lean enough, there's a higher density. It's part of that muscle maturity look. Whereas in muscles tend to look a little softer when it's more cytoplasm, more glycogen. They might be a little rounder and fuller, but they don't have the same dense, hard look. So it's an interesting thing. So really what this means is that if we want to be as strong as possible, right, we should probably gain as much muscle as possible. On the other end, if your goal is to get big and have quality muscle, you should really get strong. Your ability to produce force. Okay? Again, this is what the data is starting to show. And this isn't running experiments to compare variables. This is literally just going in and measuring existing human beings. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I'll talk to you guys next time.